It's terrifying, in a word.
When the right starts throwing around demons all the time, you're losing me, guys.
Do you not believe that there are people who are in Hollywood, politicians, etc., who actually practice Satanism?
There's spirit cooking parties that have gone on. There are these types of parties that have gone on.
Spirits?
Anyone can look this stuff up.
A lot of them believe that they need to literally sell their soul. They believe they need to sell their soul for some level of fame or power or whatever it is. And they believe that in doing that and undergoing these ritualistic practices, that they will achieve their ends.
Where are you getting this from?
Have you ever looked into it, though?
No.
I think the Democratic Party is almost complicit because they idolize these people.
Lindy, listen to me. I love you. We gotta get off the bone with the Democratic Party.
I don't think this is a political issue. I just think he's a freak and likes to do weird, freaky things. There was like smearing of male goo on him after all was said and done.
Sounds kind of ritualistic.
Why are you trying so hard to get through this segment? Can you help me, please? All right, guys, welcome to Her Take. As always, I'm going to ask you to please like, comment, share, subscribe, go a step further, click the bell notification. It helps us out a ton with the algorithm. And we are all incredibly excited to welcome Jack Posobiec to the show.
Welcome.
I will not be giving her take. I don't know if this is like a pronoun thing, but that is definitely not
We don't
mine.
do pronouns.
Oh, I'm so disappointed. Okay, well,
do my take, if that's all
your
right.
take, that'll work. Are we gonna let it slide, team?
Well, let it
Maybe.
slide this
Depends
time.
on what we're sliding. Like,
Oh,
what's going on?
jeez, you're already in trouble, Jack. We're gonna begin.
Haven't do anything yet.
We're gonna begin with Diddy. All right, the bottom line is, this has been a huge elephant in the room for the show, largely because of me. I am repulsed by this subject matter. I don't understand why people are fascinated with it, and I have avoided learning about it, let alone discussing it, and the girls have appropriately corrected me that this is a national conversation for a reason, and Amy wants to jump in and explain her thoughts on why America is obsessed with this case. Amy?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for America as a whole. For me and the people I know, there's this morbid fascination with it for multiple reasons. And by the way, I don't purport to be an expert on this case, but I think there's a lot of overlap with the way people are viewing the Epstein conversation and the Diddy one. For example, the hidden power structures that could exist within Hollywood. You know, it was announced that there were like hundreds of hidden cameras inside of Diddy's house. I believe that some of this is still being contested. It's up for debate. That is the narrative, right? There are so many politicians who are at this party. Trump, the Clintons were there, Kamala Harris, Barack Obama. In a similar way that Epstein held political capital and blackmail leverage over these politicians, I think it's very, very likely that the Diddy parties existed to kind of do the same thing. The other element that is lesser so proven, and I don't even think this is going to be a discussion in the court cases because it kind of leads towards the more conspiratorial side, but there is something to be said about the occult and the way the occult sometimes rears its ugly head both politically in the entertainment industry and various other things, that I think there could be some element of that as well. Some actual evil.
What does that mean? I don't think I can see one more, and no offense, Jack. I feel like when the right starts throwing around demons all the time, you're losing me, guys. You're losing me. Like, when we get into the whole, like, it's demonic and...
Do you not believe that there are people who are in Hollywood, politicians, etc., who actually practice Satanism?
Not really.
You don't believe in that at all?
I just think he's a freak.
But do you think whether or not you believe it isn't the question? The question is, what if they believe it?
Exactly.
But give me the evidence that they believe it. I grew up in California. These are people, yes, they're you know, they pray to the God of the almighty
Money.
dollar and power. And a lot of times when you have a lot of money...
These parties are the evidence, though. There's spirit cooking parties that have gone on. There are these types of parties that have gone on.
Spirits?
You can literally, anyone can look this stuff up. That
I'm not going to try to make
Lady
fun.
Gaga and Marina Abramovich have been all involved with in where they invite Hollywood high-level celebrities to these things.
Do you think it's genuine and not just a show?
Wait,
And,
what the hell is spirit cooking? Hold on. Come on. Hold on. This is where you guys...
You're 4 minutes in.
Is it gluten-free or...
Well, thank you for backing me up, Jack. I appreciate it.
No, I'm just saying, these parties exist, the Bohemian Grove exists, all of these things exist. Whether it's real or not, right? We can set that aside.
Okay.
But what you can't say is that these parties aren't real and that there aren't people who do, and in the past, have given these things credence and believe that they have power and do take part in
You're saying
them.
like satanic parties?
Yes.
Yes.
Are you sure that it's genuine belief, or are they just putting on a show to entertain? Because I'm not convinced that Lady Gaga is actually a Satan worshiper. I think she just wants attention.
The struggle for
I think
me.
some of them are. Some people are probably more so puppets, but then I think there are a lot of people who do genuinely believe it. And I mean,
Who, though? Based on what, though?
a lot of them
I believe
believe
it.
that they need to
I
literally
completely
sell
believe
their
it.
soul. They believe they need to sell their soul for some level of fame or power or whatever it is. And they believe that in doing that and undergoing these ritualistic practices, that they will achieve their ends.
Where are you getting this
Have you ever looked into it, though?
No, but I know they sell their soul. They sell their soul when they give Harvey Weinstein, I don't want to say,
The moment on the couch.
favors. Okay,
Right.
bingo. So, but that's not Satanism. That's a casting couch.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
it unfortunate? Yes. Is it gross and particularly dark? Yes. But is this a satanic ritual? You're losing
Well, could
me
you?
here.
Okay. Could you believe though that for certain levels of people they view it as sort of a rite of initiation? Like
But you
we
just
all
gotta
did
show
this.
me evidence that
so
these
you had to
people do
this.
this.
Can we bring this back down to earth and
Do
just
it.
talk about the more
No,
pragmatic
but that's
issue?
what the case is all. That's literally what she's talking about.
Well,
That is this case.
The case is
That's
that
why people are
Hollywood-
interested in it.
Hollywood is
Where's the-
fundamentally depraved. And I brought this up when we were talking about it earlier. I think the Democratic Party is almost complicit because they idolize these people.
Lindy, listen to me.
Lindy.
I love you. We got to get off the bone with the Democratic Party a little bit. I get it, but let's. If I could easily point to things the other side has done, and that's the go-to these days because they've wronged you so significantly, and I do appreciate it. But bring me back here.
Doesn't mean it's not true, though,
But
you
you're
know?
comparing him. But I would say there's a parallel on the other side with politics. Period. So
I don't think this is a political issue. And
I don't see that.
I don't, sure, you can believe in Satanism and other people who believe in Satanism. Put that aside, though, for a second. I want to just kind of focus on Cassie Ventura's testimony, what we learned
Okay.
about what, Sean Diddy Combs, whatever he likes to be called these days, did to her and was into himself. Whenever you have a situation in which someone has a tremendous amount of power, be it, Harvey Weinstein or Diddy in this case,
Okay.
they think that they're above the law and they can get away with anything. They have enough money and power to make anything go away. I just think he's a freak and likes to do weird, freaky things. And she was coerced, according to her, into doing these things. There were male escorts involved. There was smearing of male goo on him after all was said and done. He liked to sit back and watch her,
Sounds kind of ritualistic.
It's disgusting. Whatever. Sure, if you want to call it ritualistic, fine, whatever. But it's just, I don't think he was under the impression that he would ever be held accountable for doing what he is accused
Without
of doing.
question, you're right on that. I would say also, just to speak to the part, because I know we were all discussing last night, the girls are concerned, or the ladies are concerned, and rightfully so, that he could get off. And
Oh, he does get off, apparently. Quite a bit.
Anna, why am I trying so hard to get through this segment? Can you help me, please? So, thanks a lot. It's smearing of goo. You're killing me here, girl.
Sorry.
I did see an entire palette of, was it baby oil
Will
over
you
there?
stop?
They like
I didn't-
baby
I
oil,
couldn't tell.
apparently, yeah.
Guys, okay. So.
Is that for later? Or,
Oh my God.
I don't know.
So.
What goes on here after dark? I don't understand. I was invited.
He's got a pentagram back there.
I'm
Pentagon?
Catholic.
What is that
Okay,
thing?
wait a minute. Hold on.
Oh my God. Hold on. So there's definitely an argument that she was complicit because of texts, this, that, the other. I did see an expert explaining the fact that she
Gonna
would.
have this out.
Dear
So
God,
we don't
I
have
would
the baby
actually.
oil,
I would.
Satanism.
That
Wasn't planning on bringing this up, but since we're here, it's gonna.
comment, not even a
The
comment.
counter to that,
100%
counter to
the
that
event.
is she said she had to do that because she was afraid
know.
that he was going to do it with another woman.
Well, wait.
Not only that, he also beat her, and we have video
That's
evidence
it.
of him
That's
doing
what I'm
that.
talking
Yeah.
about. She would have to be complicit or agreeable or consensual is the word I'm looking for in every single incident.
Right.
In this one incident unto itself, they're in the middle of this freak off, and she's running for her friggin' life down the hall of the.
This is the elevator video.
Yeah.
Yes.
CNN thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't that say, all right, she was not down? And by the way, legally, just to make this point clear, that you can be in the middle of a sexual act and say, no, at any point, and then it's done. No means no, and if you continue, if the man continues or whoever continues at any moment after that, it is rape, period.
Right.
That is what the law says. So I don't understand why we think he's going to escape here. It's very clear in this moment she was done.
I think, you know, he's charged with human trafficking, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And racketeering. Yes. I think the racketeering charge is probably going to be a little more difficult for the prosecution to prove.
Okay.
I think the human trafficking will probably be easier to prove because obviously there were transactions made. Male escorts were hired to engage in said, you know, shenanigans.
Thank you.
And so we'll see how it all plays out. But so far in this case, you know, the star witness has been Cassie Ventura. There hasn't really been a big witness testifying outside of Ventura. So we have to wait and see how the prosecution presents its case.
Wasn't there some information that came out when they were conducting voir dire, so when they were doing jury selection, they had to run people through, and I haven't been following this day to day, but they had to run people through different names of celebrities that might come up during the case.
I didn't know this.
And so,
yeah, and they find it extremely difficult to find impartial jurors
Right.
for that reason,
Yeah.
right?
And I think that's more than anything why people are so interested in this case. It's, you
It's
know,
sprawling,
obviously
it
we've seen
touches
his
everybody.
video, but
Like Britney
it's about
Spears is, you
who
know,
was involved
mentioned
at this case,
because
what were they
she attended
doing.
a Diddy party.
Okay, but I'm sure a lot of people attended a Diddy party. You know, we were discussing last night the fact that, you know, who's implicated from the Democratic Party because they're in a video or a picture. There's a poster of me next to this guy from a water deal that Mark Wahlberg invited me into, and I promise you, I was never a part of the freak-offs. I wasn't even actually invited, which I've said publicly. I don't know if I'm more offended about the fact.
Do you have freak off FOMO?
Yeah, freak off.
Little freak off FOMO?
Yeah, like, what was
yeah.
wrong with me?
Yeah.
Well, was I not invited to this shindig?
FOMO.
So I see that, but it's like you can't assume guilt by association, and I speak personally here.
I agree. I totally agree. I mean, it's just because you've taken a picture with a celebrity who's now implicated in a potentially serious crime doesn't necessarily mean the person in the photo is, you know, complicit or knew about it. But obviously, some people had to have known about it, right? I'm sure there are lots of other celebrities that were at these parties. The real question is, why is it that when celebrities, public figures, see with their own two eyes, someone in a position of power abusing that power and abusing others, they just kind of stay quiet about it?
Because they want a piece.
Yeah, and
It's
so
it's not just a matter of wanting to please. They wanted the money because a lot of these celebrities, and you don't want me to bring it up, but it is
It's not that
true.
I don't, honey. I just feel like there's an imbalance in all of our dialogue where you're like the
But
Democrat,
it
the
just
Democrat, the
also
Democrat.
happens
That's
to
all.
be true. Like the Democratic Party is in shambles right now, and they have a tremendous. They are in dire straits.
Could we not show comparisons like Matt Gaetz blowing coke with teenagers?
I mean, in P. Diddy's
I don't think
case,
this is a political issue. I think that this is a criminal issue.
Hold on.
and-
People refuse to say anything because people like Harvey Weinstein bankrolled the Democratic Party. He poured so much money into the DNC.
Don't you think it has something to do with the fact that he was tremendously rich, tremendously powerful, and he could crush them?
And that's
Like, absolutely
I'm
crush
answering
them,
the
crush their
question of why
careers, ruin their
politicians
lives.
refuse to say anything because
They do, too.
they needed him
Without
to
question.
be
You'll never eat lunch
continue
in this
in
town
his
again.
position of power.
Exactly.
It's real. I've actually lived it, not in this capacity, but it's like you go against the grain, you go against the narrative, or you speak up about something, even creatively, and it's like, you'll never eat lunch. That is real, the title
It
of that
is.
book, You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again. I jokingly tell the story of the first season of Biggest Loser, where they were tempting the contestants with literal temptations. And I was only 30, but I was really disturbed about it. And I'm participating in a reality show, and I wasn't, a reality person. I was an actual trainer. And I had like flipped over the temptations, got in fights with the producers about it. And one of them walked out of the control room and he's like, "You're never gonna work in this town again." And I was like, "What are you gonna do?
Wrong
You're
again,
gonna call
Bob."
every soccer mom?" But like, I'm not kidding. And it was always like, we got to blackball Jillian Michaels. We got to blackball. That is very real. I just never cared because my actual industry was fitness, not Hollywood. But it is real. You brought up something that really touched me, though.
The victim blaming.
Bingo. Can you talk about that?
And I've never said this on air, and I'm just going to pray that the people who are involved don't watch. I am a victim of violence, for more than a decade. So it's fine. I'm not here to ask for anyone's sympathy. I'm a big girl. I can handle it. I'm great. But it just breaks my heart to see her being victim shamed. And people saying, oh, because she took a settlement, suddenly what she's saying isn't true. Which is, I mean, two things can be true at once.
Surely.
And I think people just need to be much more respectful. This lady literally had a kid this weekend too, and she still went to court to give her powerful story. I think we should give her some credit.
There's something to be said about like Stockholm syndrome as well, right? Like people fall in love with their abusers, and that does not negate the abuse that they experienced just because they stayed with them, went back to them, were under their control. Like, Stockholm syndrome is a seriously studied mental condition, and it's something that nearly always occurs in these long-term abusive relationships.
Yeah.
So I think we can absolutely give Cassie grace.
Why do you
on that.
think, though, as a culture, we default to it? Because it is a thing. It is a huge thing. She was asking for it.
It is a huge thing. And I hate that line of thinking.
It's real, though.
Like domestic violence is complicated, right? How many women, get beaten by their husbands over and over again, and they stay, and people blame the woman for staying, but psychologically speaking, it's a lot more complicated than people realize. And so we should create pathways for people to feel comfortable leaving, you know what I'm saying? As opposed to judging them for staying. Because maybe they have all these ideas in their heads about, like, if I leave, he's gonna find me and murder me. All the...
Sure.
There's a lot of fear.
Where am I going to go?
And that's for the average everyday person. Imagine someone in Cassie's position then, where Diddy has so much power and influence.
Exactly.
You don't know what blackmail or leverage he has over her as well. Like, it's difficult enough for the average everyday person to leave an abusive relationship like that, let alone someone in her situation.
And she was a kid. Let's not forget that she was a kid when this all started. She was 19 years old. And so he basically stole an entire decade away from this woman.
But you're still making excuses as to why she stayed, and we're not litigating, and I'm going to put a button on it, but it's something I do think we should all think about as a culture. Anybody watching, why we blame the victim. Why are we doing that? What is the vulnerability in that we just are like, no, this can't be real. It had to be her. Because, again, the more we make excuses about why she stayed, the more it's like, but don't blame her, but don't blame her. And I get all of that. But the question is, why is anybody blaming her in the first place?
I hate to say it, but a lot of it does come down to misogyny. It is what it is. I know that people don't like to blame things on sexism, but in this case, in this particular case of domestic violence, I really think it is. And this is centuries of inertia that we're fighting against. And I've had direct experience. It is so hard to leave. So hard to leave, especially when financiers are involved. Like, you're going to be out on the alternative is to be out on the street.
Right, I get it.
And Cassie was broke apart from this. She depended on him for her career. She signed a record deal for 10 records.
Gosh.
Her entire life was intertwined with this man's.
Wow.
Well, that was uplifting. Segment 2.
Onto a lighter topic.
Another name, I know, in the long list of scumbags. And another elephant in the room on this show. Again, I'll take responsibility. Epstein. So you've got Attorney General Pam Bondi being secretly recorded at a lunch, admitting that there are 10,000 tapes, and then being forced into this impromptu press conference to do damage control. So let's take a look here.
Her press office.
There are tens and thousands of videos, and it's all with little kids.
There are tens of thousands of videos of Epstein with children or child porn.
And somehow nobody blinked about that, by the way. And then you've got Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, two guys who question everything, suddenly turning around and saying it's unilaterally confirmed that Epstein was a suicide. Let's take one more look at this one.
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to? I can't. I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
That looks like a hostage video.
It does,
I'm keeping it real. I'm keeping it real, yes.
Jack, I was going to go to you first on this one. Thoughts?
You were at the White House.
It's exactly what it looks like.
Yeah, so I mean, a couple things. I mean, obviously, I haven't seen everything that they've seen. I would love to see if there are tapes. I want to see all the tapes. There were some photos that came out. I'd love to see more of all of that. I spent a little under a year at Guantanamo Bay, so I know what prison suicides look like. That was something we dealt with quite a bit down there, and all sorts of detention related violence that goes on in between detainees, as well as detainees trying to kill themselves. In that case, sometimes it would be in the name of jihad or what have you, as opposed to something like a pedophile killing themselves in jail. So again, I want to see the evidence. That's what it comes down to for everything on that. But when it comes to the tapes and the files, and you mentioned, I was in this. I have gone to the White House. I have asked for the Epstein Files, and there was this binder that we were given from DOJ, which I don't think necessarily was meant in bad faith, but unfortunately, a lot of the material that we had in that binder had already been seen. There were a few pieces that that were new, but it wasn't substantially new. And that's the thing everybody wants, because at the end of the day, we keep hearing, oh, the Epstein tapes, oh, the Epstein Files, and it's coming. So when you gas up people like that and you tell them that, hey, this is right around the corner, TikTok, and it's about to come out, you have to actually deliver at some point.
And it was a campaign promise. It's something that I was definitely interested in Trump actually carrying out and doing.
Well, and the question is that I would prefer a lot more and I think there does need to be more transparency on this, is she mentions the 10,000 tapes. Are there 10,000 tapes? Do you have possession of them, or have you heard of them?
Exactly, yeah.
Or was this something that was potentially destroyed by agents or whoever have you, and we're not going to see them at all?
Jack, do you think we're going to get an additional onslaught of files, or is this it?
I wouldn't hold my breath at this point.
Right.
I really wouldn't hold my breath.
Right. I wanted to ask you, what do you think was their intention when they did that publicity stunt? Because surely they should have known that people are going to realize that it's a whole nothing burger, that most of the stuff's redacted or it's already been seen. What impression do you think they were trying to give when they did that? And did they just not have the foresight to think ahead and have everybody realize?
Yeah, I think it could have been handled better, obviously. And having been look, they invited us in, and we're there. And by the way, this was not just a one-on-one kind of thing. So there were different. Bobby Kennedy came in, Secretary of Health and Human Services. Caroline Leavitt came in, Vice President Vance came in. So
Pam Bondi
there were,
was there too,
and then Pam Bondi came in, so along with Kash Patel. So it wasn't like it was a one-on-one, and we didn't even hear the words Epstein Files when we were all brought in.
Oh,
and
really?
so there were a bunch of
new
media figure. It was a just sort of a new media day at the White House. So I'm there, and a bunch of other influencer types are there. DC Drano lives at TikTok.
Scott Pressler was there.
Scott Pressler, And so
Did you feel like you were you and the others who were included in this? I think Laura Loomer was included in it as well.
She
Did
wasn't.
you feel?
She
oh,
was
she
not
wasn't.
there. She was not there.
Hell about not being included.
Did you
actually.
feel at any point that maybe all the folks that were included in this were kind of just used as pawns to give the illusion that the Trump administration released the Epstein Files?
I don't know, because what I was going to say was that, again, there was no communication beforehand about, that these files or these binders would even be presented. And actually, it was just sort of said, hey, do you guys want to see the Epstein Files? Well, yes, obviously. And then someone just walks, like a staffer just walks in the room with a stack of binders. Oh, wow, what is this? And so we're trying to, kind of go through it, but we're also in the meeting, so you don't really have time to track all, and it's long and it's textual, so you can't search it or anything. And then all of a sudden, you have to go to your next meeting. Well, and it just so happened, supposedly, that Keir Starmer, who had just become the Prime Minister of the UK, was about to show up like 10 minutes after. So he was basically going to be in the room right after us. So when we leave the West Wing portico, the entire media is there with all the cameras out, and everyone's set up waiting for the PM, not for us.
Oh, I see.
And so they say, hey, what are Poso and Cernovich and all these guys doing holding all these binders? And what does that binder say? And point being is, I don't necessarily think that it was intentional. I think it was just a series of unfortunate events that kind of played out in a way that looked bad online, but I really don't think it was intentional.
My prediction is that we're never going to get any information about those tapes. Pam Bondi framed it as, it's tapes of Epstein himself,
Right.
doing these
busted.
things.
That's why
But
she had to come
the reason
clean.
why I think that we're not going to ever know anything about the tapes, see them, know who's in them, is because it's not just Epstein.
Of
okay?
course not.
I think a lot of people in
course
positions
not.
of power in this country have been implicated in those tapes, and either those tapes have already been destroyed or they're doing whatever it takes to prevent them from being released.
Can I bring up one thing that Benny Johnson told me that I did not know? And when I did some fact checking on it, it turns out everything he told me was true. So he starts out by talking about a gentleman named Donald Barr, who was a part of OSS, which apparently was the precursor to the CIA. Donald Barr apparently takes Epstein under his wing, gives him this job at the financial institution, and is also the one who connects Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell.
Robert Maxwell,
Bingo.
her father, and
Yep.
then she, is introduced to Epstein through her father. Yep.
Right. And supposedly Robert Maxwell has ties to Mossad. So now you have ties to CIA, ties to Mossad. And then if we just continue to skip
As
forward.
well as the royal family.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So if you continue to skip forward, right, no one knows where the money for his funds came from. That's all weird. But it turns out, to circle this all the way back to the friggin' Cash Patel Dan Bongino tape clip that we just ran, the guy who signed Epstein's death certificate is Donald Barr's son, Bill Barr. What are the odds? Just like, really? No, that's why I think, given all that.
It gets weirder than that. Guess who visited him right before he died by suicide, quote unquote? Bill Barr. He paid him a visit to the prison.
He was he still the Attorney General at the time?
At the time,
Yeah.
okay,
Well,
he was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just find the whole thing to be very fishy. So like Jack just said, I want to see the evidence
You're never
of
seeing it.
of how he actually committed suicide. And Jack, I heard you mention something earlier in a separate conversation. You mentioned something fishy about the configuration of the room, of the prison room.
Oh, well, yeah. So there were some photos that were released. I don't know if you guys have them or maybe you pull it up, but there were some photos that were released after his body was taken out, where you could see that he had taken, I guess, strips of the different, prison uniforms and was using them to. It looked as though he had tried to kill himself multiple times throughout the room, and so there was like a tie on one side. You've seen it.
Yeah, I mean,
and a
he
tie on
was
the
on
other
suicide
side,
watch.
and
Suicide
had been on
watch.
suicide watch.
They
and
just
so-
stopped watching when he actually committed
and so
suicide.
it all just looks very fishy. That's all I was saying about
suddenly
those.
didn't work.
About those photos. And well, I think the cameras, I don't think there were cameras on the cell itself. I think there were cameras on the cell block. And there was a camera that went perpendicular to that. So it was the other hallway before you got to that cell block. And that camera was off. So you couldn't see whether or not someone had arrived and then gone down the hall. And so, look, there's a big piece of this, though, that I think a lot of people miss is, so much focus on Epstein. Look, he's not around anymore. But you know who is Ghislaine Maxwell. She's sitting right there in prison. So I've always said, why not go, and I say this as a guy who was in an intel, right? So I was an intel officer, literally served at Guantanamo. Take your thoughts on that and whatever, like we did it. And so when you look in terms of intelligence collection, why not cut her a plea deal and say, all right, you get whatever much time off your sentence, but we need this. We need the network, we need the clients, we need the rest of it.
Gone.
Yeah,
I don't think she'd survive that.
She's not dead now?
Well, she hasn't been speaking, right?
That we know
She's
of.
just off the friggin' map. No one thinks of her. No one talks of her.
I would put pressure there, whether public or not.
I think that's smart, actually.
I hope that it's done. Moving on. All right, guys. So let's talk about something that's been flying under the radar for a while, and it's going
20
to
years
affect,
at this point.
Yeah.
It's going to affect millions of Americans. You bring up, passed in 2005 after 9/11, the Real ID Act, which sets federal standards for state-issued IDs, driver's licenses, passports, you name it. The goal, supposedly, was preventing terrorism by tightening ID verification. Let's take a look at this clip with Kristi Noem here, laying it out.
Hi, I'm Kristi Noem, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. If you plan on traveling, we need your help to prevent delays and to prove your identity. Get a Real ID. Starting May 7th, you will need a Real ID to travel by air or to visit federal buildings in the United States. These IDs keep our country safe because they help prevent fraud and they enhance security. Please do your part to protect our country. Go today and don't delay. To learn more, go to dhs.gov/real-ID. Thank you.
Okay, so
I just saw that this morning at the airport. They have like the giant Christy Gnome when I come in, and it's like, okay, that's how you can tell there's an admin change that's going on.
So the concern is that it's centralized, it's trackable, and it opens up the door to mass surveillance. This has been a big one for you. So Amy, go ahead and take it.
Yeah, so I actually started to pay attention to this when it happened in Australia with something called the Digital ID Act. But this is scary because this could literally be the exact Trojan horse that globalists need to eventually down the track be able to usher in some very, very evil, nefarious things. Now, one of the main issues that people have with this specifically relates to the sweeping authority that the DHS has to determine the official scope under which it can be mandated and required for. Former DHS Secretary Chertoff, is that how you pronounce it?
That's correct.
Yeah, so he said, he was very much against this, and he said it could eventually be required for everything from cashing a check, hiring a babysitter, literally simple everyday things that you need to do. And the issue becomes when you look towards other countries like China, for example, they have something called a social credit system. And people think it's a massive jump to say something like that could happen here in the United States. But you have to understand that having a digitized ID you need that first. That's the first step. That's what would underpin a social credit system. You can't have a social credit system if you don't first have your identity digitized. And so there's the issue with the scale and scope upon which the DHS can mandate this. The other issue is, it could become the mechanism to become a surveillance state. They mandate these high resolution images on the IDs, and currently there are 35 states that utilize facial recognition technology. They map out the spaces between your features, your eyes, ears, nose, mouth. The distance between each of those features for you are as unique to you as what your thumbprint is. So when you talk about places like China, right, with a simple scan, they can determine exactly who that person is instantaneously. And we are giving them the runway to eventually be able to implement that here. Now, do I think it would happen anytime soon? No. But this isn't just as simple as, oh, it's just an ID, you're being conspiratorial. No, we need to have the proper guardrails in place inside of the act to make sure it is not weaponized and it is not used outside of its intended scope.
I want to do one thing real quick. I actually would like for you to explain real quick to everybody, in case they are not familiar, what is China's social credit score?
It's terrifying, in a word. Thank you for giving me a chance to propound on this, because Amy, I'm totally with you on this. The implications are just vast. For example, in China, people who didn't have the right vaccination record would be raided by the authorities, and they would be sent into quarantine using this digital ID. And to bring it closer to home, in Canada, truckers were debanked using the digital ID. So do not exactly.
I thought it was a Patriot Act.
In Canada?
Yeah. Oh, no. Here, it's, sorry.
Well, yeah, it is the Patriot Act here.
It was, okay, yeah.
But also in Canada, it's already happening. So do not tell me that this is just some sort of dystopian nightmare, because it's literally happening already in places like China and Canada, or closer to home. And in China, the Communist Party killed my great-grandfather, okay? So I have a first-hand taste of how nefarious the regime can be.
Right.
They will do everything they can to harness the power of this digital technology to control every facet of your life, to silence you, and to scare the living daylight out of any possible dissidents.
Can I just make one more quick point? Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts too. For people who say that this wouldn't happen here, guys, there was literally a vaccine passport that was mandated for a point of time. That, in a way, was a form of a digital ID where they said, if you do not have this identification, you cannot go into certain places.
You couldn't go to work, you couldn't go to school.
You couldn't go sit in a restaurant and eat food with your family, you know? So for anyone who says it wouldn't happen, it literally nearly already did. And all it took was this fake, fabricated pandemic in order for them to implement it. What's to stop them from fabricating another emergency, another pandemic, to usher in the deadly consequences of this?
I was going to say, does anybody want to steel man the other side here before we continue?
I can say something that's similar to that steel manning, because I have heard in discussions in DC, it's like, because I've tried to figure out, this is something it's hugely unpopular. It's something that I'm personally, I've said I'm very against this. I try to understand, I know it's been on the books. Why not kick it down the can, a few more years, get rid of it? Why not? So apparently there is a thought that it can actually help with deportations
Right.
and of
You can't
illegal aliens
fly?
because so in order to apply for your real ID, you have to show two forms of ID as well as citizenship, as well as passport, something like that. So it creates another check on being able to, basically if you're not a citizen or you're not here illegally, then you would have to be able to not get your real ID, which would prevent you from able to go anywhere. However, I guess the way my thinking on that is I think that doesn't work because those people don't fly. Because they typically take cars, they do the Greyhound or whatever kind of like black bus kind of system you have set up. They use human smuggling, like this Garcia guy was caught up in Tennessee for. So I get the logic, I suppose, but I just don't think the practice makes
solution to
sense.
that
Wait, hold on. Hang on.
Let me just make
Only
one
because
quick point.
But that's the
I've
steel
clipped her
manning,
every time. I
I
appreciate
guess that I've heard.
I think it's important to kind of, and this is difficult to do, but go back 20 years and try to think about what the mindset was among our politicians 20 years ago and what motivated them to pass this type of legislation that requires this type of ID. It was pretty soon after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, right? So there was a lot of fear-mongering about national security, and a lot of Americans bought into that fear-mongering because something tragic and disastrous did happen on U.S. soil. More than 3,000 Americans were killed as a result of those terrorist attacks. And so the thing that happened that I think we're still seeing the consequences of is a lot of our civil liberties. We signed over a lot of our civil liberties, right?
Sure.
And we allowed these politicians to scare us into handing those civil liberties away.
When, by the way, a lot of those terrorists that you're talking about actually had driver's licenses that were issued by states, even when none of them were here in a status beyond like student visa, tourist visa, this kind of thing. So I've actually said, and a lot of us have said from this perspective, that if you really are worried about terrorism from that perspective, the issue is open borders. The issue is not necessarily going after our own people and this idea that, like the TSA, just go. I looked this up the other day. I was trying to figure out, how many terrorists has the TSA actually caught? Does anyone know?
Zero.
They actually miss a lot of weapons and things like that.
Wow.
No, so when I was in the military, I was stationed. I can't say where it was, but we had a program where we would actually go in and run the tests of TSA. And so we would have, so I would get someone, and we would have like a dummy ticket that was, generated, and then we would have someone go.
Jack.
We would have someone make like a fake IED kind of thing, like use like a Dorito can and have devices in it, a Pepsi can in a Dorito bag, and it has like
to test them
to run a test. And then see if the dogs wouldn't necessarily pick it up because it wouldn't have actual explosives in it.
So scary what
and
you're
you would run
saying.
it through. And when we ran these, and then as I would take like one of my Intel analysts and put them in civvies and say, hey, go through and see if you can get this through. And it was about 100% of the time.
Are you serious?
100% that it would go through.
Wow.
And then it would stink because then my analyst would have to sit there as the TSA agent got pulled in with their supervisor, and they would like open the suitcase and show what it was, and
Tell me they fixed the problems afterwards?
no,
No.
not at all.
No.
So it's
And
zero. It's
there's
actually zero. The TSA has never stopped a single terrorist.
That's
I do know
terrifying.
that.
But
No,
there's
it's
also another
security
issue
theater.
that we
It's a
didn't even
joke.
mention, which is huge: the data breaches.
That's true.
Governments
Hacking.
are notorious for compromising our information. They are so bad at it. Why would we give them even more information to mess up?
I would abolish the entire TSA. Just get rid of it. Completely get rid of it.
So let me play a devil's advocate here for a moment, in particular with you, since you have experience in intelligence. I've had several conversations with individuals that also were in the military and worked in intelligence, and the argument that they've given me is that we give up certain freedoms for protection. And they swear that it's legitimate in most cases. They're like, listen, you don't get it all. You want us to stop everything? There are thousands and thousands of threats against this country every single day, and we catch almost all of them. But you don't get to have all of your freedoms and all of your privacies and still count on us to catch this stuff. Is it true or not true?
I think there's a lot of people who go on podcasts that have served in like the intel community, and they perpetuate this idea of the secret world theory.
Okay.
That there's this secret world of intel agencies and shadowy terrorist non-state actors, third-party actors that are constantly trying to, and that's not to say that they don't exist. I'm not saying obviously terrorists exist. Obviously, you need a security apparatus to be able to deal with that. But what I'm saying is that this type of stuff, you look at the stuff that gets missed constantly. You look at constant bombings. You look at people running over. There was a guy at New Orleans on New Year's where he was out there posting YouTube videos talking about how he was going to do exactly what he did, and nothing. So all the billions of dollars that we spend on this, all of the liberties and freedoms that we do give up, and you turn around and say, how much of this was stopped? And then on the flip side, you also have to ask, and I think you'll probably agree with me here, how much of this is actually created by the agencies themselves by going in and running informants and running handlers to try to create the terrorist so that then they can go in and catch the guy.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Given the CIA's track record, I would believe
which
it.
has happened, which by the way, that these agencies, and certainly the FBI, was doing for years to Muslim kids online.
That is true.
Where they would go in and be like, oh, you like ISIS, right? You like Al Qaeda, right? And then get them to respond a bunch of times.
Yeah, they would entrap people.
And create entrapment operations.
Yeah, I mean, look, the intelligence community in this country on many occasions has entrapped people, right? So like, it's not far-fetched to believe that happens. But honestly, I really do think that this is more about giving the illusion of security.
100%.
I think that we have a widespread competency issue in this country when it comes to really important roles pertaining to the security of Americans, the security at airports and things like that. Look, there hasn't been a large-scale terrorist attack, thank God, on U.S. soil since 9/11. But we have to be really careful to not allow the government, which of course wants to encroach on our freedoms, including our privacy rights, by scaring us, right? By in a lot of cases, drumming up a lot of fear among Americans about how your national security is at risk, you could be the victim of a terrorist attack. Okay, you guys can't even catch a mass shooter who's posting about the mass shooting for weeks prior to carrying it out. So like, here's the issue. You have people in plain sight saying that they're gonna cause mass harm, and why doesn't the intelligence community catch them? What's going on with that? You know, why do they have to keep encroaching on our freedoms, our rights, with this like false pretense of national security?
Yep. Jack, I'm going to give you the button on this, and what do you think an alternative might be, especially to things like the TSA?
Well, there's things where airport security could be done with the Joint Terrorism Task Force. You could work with local agencies to be able to build up something, as opposed to having this wide sweeping. And a lot of what the TSA is right now is a make-work agency for city unions, basically, for each airport. I mean, you look at some of these people that are at the TSA, and you're like, you're not going to stop anyone. You're not going to be catching anybody. You're barely even looking at the bags. You're barely even looking at the people going through. You're holding up people over like,
yogurt.
I
got stopped for my vanilla yogurt.
I'll give you an example of this, right? The yogurt. So think about this. Just think about how stupid. Think about how stupid the TSA is. Right?
You shouldn't be laughing.
So you take out the water bottle. You can't have water over 3 ounces, right? Because the water 3 ounces, that could be a chemical bomb, right? So that could be a chemical weapon. So, and this is like, you know, I don't usually play the intel officer card, right? But whatever.
But you have the ability to.
So all of the bottles that we're putting in that one trash can at the front of the security aisle are there because those could potentially be chemical weapons, right? So chemical bombs, or precursors. So you're making a giant stockpile of potential liquid bombs
right in front of the
there
plane,
in front of everyone. Where, I don't know, have you gone to an airport lately? They're all backed up because the security situation is so bad. You could kill everyone in there.
Jack,
but they're so stupid that
I know.
not one
who
of
do we
them
just
thinks
give
about
Jack,
ideas
you bring
to?
up such a good point.
No, you think about it.
Yeah, I never thought about that.
I think about it every time I walk
We're not
past.
intelligence
You
officers,
hit on
though.
a really-
You think differently.
So there's a million things you could
hit
do
on a
with these
really
airports.
good
It's all
point.
theater.
You hit on a really good point that actually hasn't been trumpeted enough.
And by the way, the reason they put them in there is because they know it's just water.
Yeah, but going back to what you said about
You can't
make
check a
work.
water bottle. It's water. Can you drink some?
Going back to what you said about make work and how the TSA is basically a way to provide jobs for people.
100%.
That's what the federal government is. And that's why people are so pissed about the Doge cuts. NPR just came out with NPR, which is not known to be a right-wing bastion, came out with a piece on how the people who are most hurt by federal job cuts is the black middle class. Because I mean, this is what they said. And so these federal jobs, some of which don't really serve a purpose, elevated an entire demographic. I'm just saying, I'm pointing it out. You make a good point.
You'd probably appreciate in China when Deng Xiaoping took over, they had the system that prior to him under full communism with Chairman Mao, the Iron Rice Bowl, was it the Yinfan Wan? And so the Iron Rice Bowl was this idea of all the make-work jobs in China, and everyone could have a job, and everybody gets something. And when I lived in China, you would see this all the time, where they still have the make-work jobs, where they're building skyscrapers that nobody lives in, or they're painting the building like 100 times a year. Like, why are you doing all this? Because they have to put people to work, so they're constantly doing that.
They literally have these towns with these like beautiful villas and mega mansions. It looks like you're in Italy. No one lives in them. It's kind of wild. They're like ghost towns in China.
It's a tacit agreement. As long as you get as long as you keep the economic engine running, we won't revolt.
Well, speaking of China, I'm gonna shift gears just a little bit. So this next story comes out of a podcast that I was listening to, a Barry Weiss podcast, with Financial Times reporter Patrick McGee, and it flips the script on everything we thought about Apple and their role with China. So the popular belief is that Apple is exploiting cheap Chinese labor so they can scale, right? But McGee argues it's the other way around, that China exploited Apple and Beijing opened the door on purpose, not out of goodwill, of course, but out of a long-term strategy to let Apple in order to extract industrial processes, train millions of workers, and build a tech empire of its own. So the bigger implications here with regard to America's monster corporations partnering with a foreign adversary economically, technologically, and geopolitically are of concern. And again, Lindy, I know you want this one.
Yeah.
Go for it.
And I mentioned this before. I'm with President Trump on tariffs because somebody needed to do it. Somebody needed to kick China in the ass. And I'm saying it as someone of Chinese descent. China has been unfairly exploiting our international system for decades, especially, I mean, since the era of Deng Xiaoping, as you mentioned, but especially since they entered the WTO in 2001. And so what they do is steal the technical know-how of these American behemoths like Apple and then make it their own. It's what they did with the phones and the cars and now AI. And so our treasure of NVIDIA now has to compete with China. But it was our technology to begin with. And also the electric vehicles, there's so many things that they took from us. So I'm completely with Trump in his attempt to make sure that we are finally on a modicum of a level playing field.
I think this is a mutually exploitative setup, okay? I don't think for 1 second that American-based corporations are like, oh, the poor innocent corporations, they're getting their, IP stolen by big bad China. Of course China's gonna steal your IP, of course. Okay, oh, I don't wanna pay American workers to make my product. Right. I wanna exploit labor in China. And China's like, yes, come to us. We'll make your products. And yeah, they're gonna steal the IP. That is what they do. It is a foreign country. They have no loyalty to America or Americans. Of course they're gonna do this. So look, the Pandora's box was opened during the Bill Clinton administration, and I just find it kind of gross that now all of these companies that have enjoyed massive profits as a result of exploiting labor abroad are now making themselves out to be the victims. I'm not buying it.
700 million, by the way, since Tim Cook moved them over to China. That was the jump in how much money they were making, how much profit. But here's something also to think about. So Apple trained 28 million Chinese workers and essentially transferred the industrial capabilities to China. But it goes on to explain that Apple has inadvertently enhanced China's military because of this.
I'm not surprised.
But here's my question, right? So we've talked about like, okay, China's getting richer, they're stealing our IP, now we're enhancing their military. I'm hearing about chips and vacuums like that are listening to you or something.
We should have been making our own semiconductor chips, period, full stop. You need those chips for almost everything that we use, okay?
Well, we get most of our chips from Taiwan, not China.
Okay, but still, I'm not comfortable with a foreign government or foreign country making products that pertain to national security, pharmaceutical drugs. Those chips are necessary for so many of the products we rely on, devices that are used in hospitals. So look, my point is, it's fine to have a trade relationship with foreign countries in which we're not putting too much on the line. But when we're outsourcing these critical jobs in these critical fields to let's not play dumb.
But then how does tariffs solve the problem? That's my bigger question. So it's like, all right, you're going to tax them more, but you're still giving them.
Well, you're
the tech,
incentivizing.
you're training. I mean, how is this solving a problem?
Trump
Like, is the real answer
saying,
to get out of China? And that's really my question.
Because so the reason for tariffs is this, and I've spent a long time focused on China, and I lived there, worked at a very low level job at the Shanghai American Chamber of Commerce. And I saw this up front, where U.S. companies would come in and U.S. political leaders would go in, and they would just be completely intoxicated with the Chinese system. So you talk about the digital credit score and the control. They love it. American leaders love it. There was this idea that if we open the door to China, it's going to make China more liberal, more liberalized, more democratic, but it's been actually the exact opposite. It's the opposite. We become more authoritarian, we become more tyrannical, we become more centralized, we become more controlling, and you get these technocrats like a Michael Bloomberg or a Gavin Newsom, they love it. They absolutely love this total control of society, total control, total power. And so, and Wall Street, of course, loves it as well because they get all the margins. And who does it screw over? Like, this is why the Rust Belt is the Rust Belt. This is why Shenzhen looks like it does, and Hong Kong, and Shanghai, and Chicago and Detroit, and everywhere looks the way that they do, or the entire Northeast, basically. And so the issue with tariffs is you've got to do something. Because these opportunists, these mercantilists, they're never going to say, oh, well, you know what? I'm going to be a good American, and I'm going to hire an American because that's the American way, and I want that made in America. They're not going to do that on their own. They're going to say, who makes the cheapest widget? These guys make the cheapest widget, and if they won't do it, by the way, and a lot of the low-cost manufacturing is even now moving down to Vietnam and other parts of
But that doesn't make the situation
Southeast
better.
Asia. No, it doesn't.
It's like,
we'll
just move out of China and go to another foreign country.
And that's why you need tariffs.
China is particularly diabolical, whereas it would seem that Vietnam doesn't have the CCP.
You never know what the future holds in regard to our relationships, geopolitically speaking, right?
Well, what is the solution, though?
There was a whole thing between us and Vietnam at one point.
I remember,
as a matter of fact.
yeah.
Didn't they move it to India? I thought that's what happened.
Well,
I'm hearing Malaysia, India, Vietnam, but like it's a ping pong ball if it actually moves, or we just charge more. But I don't see how this solves our problem. And I want to get back to the Newsom thing because you and I can litigate that, and no one's talking about his relationship to China.
Oh, he turned. It's China-fornia. It's China-fornia, and
called it China SF.
And the minute
when he was mayor,
and the minute that
he, the
minute that Xi Jinping comes over, and suddenly he cleans up the streets, all the homeless are out,
more than
all the crime stops.
That really pissed me off.
But you see that because that was him showing respect to someone he actually views as powerful, because this is someone that he wants to eventually be on his side when he runs for president.
Absolutely.
He set this up with China SF, which was a partnership with this guy, Vincent Lo, who's a billionaire connected to the CCP. And it essentially facilitated their ability. He's like, oh, we're going to do business together. But you're seeing, exactly, you're cleaning up the cities. And what it does is it clears red tape for them to buy real estate and build things. Meanwhile, Californians can't build a shed, as Bill Marceau famously put it, or put in a toilet without spending 2 years trying to get a permit.
Right.
And then a bill landed on his desk to veto the ability for foreign countries to buy farmland in California. And he vetoed the bill that was banning them from doing it.
Yeah, I don't think...
It is filthy dirty, and just one more chapter in our Newsom story.
I don't think that foreigners who have no interest in actually living in the United States, who are not living in the United States, should have the ability to buy up American real estate, buy up American farmland, buy up property close to our military bases. That is so ridiculous. And by the way, we've had a huge problem in this country with foreigners buying up homes, laundering money. Like, they launder their money by buying up U.S. real estate. We have a housing shortage. Why do we not have a federal law to ban this practice? Some states have banned it. Texas and Florida have banned it. But why is it that we don't have a federal law on this?
What serious country would allow this?
I mean, Newsom in particular not only started this partnership, he did it under that very open pretense of come do business, build stuff here.
I mean, that's precisely the reason why we haven't banned it, because our politicians benefit from the campaign contributions. And not only that, it's not just China, though. Saudi Arabia owns our water rights in Texas. Did you know that?
Ridiculous.
It's so ridiculous. And Anna, I agree with you on this. No foreign country should be owning real estate in America. They don't have. This actually leads to the issue of anchor babies and why I'm with Trump on the birthright citizenship thing, too. You have a lot of women from Asia, they take vacations here just so their children can be American. Don't tell me this isn't happening, because I actually know people who do this. It's awful.
It's a little bit of a separate issue.
It's just like foreigners exploiting our system, exploiting our open system, our democracy for their own gain, and they just leave.
Well, but to harken back to previous topics we've covered in other shows, when you discuss the Saudis and Qatar spending hundreds of billions, literally billions of dollars on buying influence here, this is why you don't have a federal ban. This is the answer to why it's a problem. I don't know how we solve it, but I do think we should be healthily skeptical of these arrangements.
Well, 100%. And I remember, there was a big story that came out during Trump's first term in regard to some of these Russian oligarchs paying above market price for, his condos and some of the Trump properties, right? And so that's seen as a way of potentially influencing the president, and there was a big issue with that. I think all of these practices do need to be banned. I think that there are examples on both sides of the political aisle where this type of influence takes place. We need politicians who want to be public servants and serve the best interests of the American people. Unfortunately, we don't have much of that going on right now.
And you're right that it's on both sides. You know what's one of the biggest foreign money laundering organizations on the Democratic side? The Clinton Foundation. They took so much money. Right now, Hillary Clinton's out there playing the holier-than-thou card, saying, oh, Trump is taking money from Qatar. You know who else took money from Qatar? Tens of millions of dollars? Herself.
Yeah,
so
the corruption runs deep.
It has to be eradicated. It's absolutely sick, and we touched on this before, but it's also in our universities as well. Our Ivy League system is awash with foreign money. It's sick.
Yeah, it is. Where did I bring us, though? I did what I tried to tell you guys not to do, and I took us all the way off piste to Newsom in China, so I apologize. Bringing us back to the initial subject matter, though, what do we think the solution is?
Well, Elon just needs to make a brand new smartphone, all right? And it's just going to completely replace Apple and everything as we know it.
Well, Jillian, that's what the purpose
Have you signed
of
up for Neuralink yet? Are you
absolutely.
in trials?
Super against transhumanism, but that's actually a good point. Yeah, who knows what he would do to the phone as well. I have my skepticisms about Elon, especially when it comes to Neuralink. So that's actually a good point.
It's just one of those things where it's I love the technology, right? I think we all kind of love technology, but then you have to question, are there limits to it?
Right.
What are the limits? Where do we want to actually hold this down and say, look, are we playing God? Are we playing God with people? What if children get Neuralink? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's gene therapy now.
There's
they can literally go in utero, apparently, and you can decide if you want to alter your kids.
No way!
But there's,
my goodness.
With every
designer
issue,
babies.
It's so much more complex and nuanced, right? Because if you have, let's say, the cancer gene in your family, right? That type of scientific advancement can essentially mitigate that cancer gene.
Down syndrome. They can correct it with technologies like CRISPR, supposedly.
But like any technology or any medical advancement,
typically they just abort them.
It can be abused, right?
It's true. It's true. That's
yeah, no,
that's an alternative. Then arguably, if the alternative is, which is sad, but if you could correct it. But then it's do you create this Uber race? I mean, really, it does open a lot of Pandora's box.
The movie Gattaca came out in the 90s. That's Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke was all about this, where the people, and getting back to what you said about digital IDs and centralized control, it set up basically two races of people where you had the valids and the invalids.
Right.
And I remember seeing that movie and I was like, this is everything. This is where it's all going. And I remember, I don't know why I said this, but I said something about, since we're on her take, I guess I'll say this.
Do it.
That I said I would never marry someone who didn't understand this movie. Because I would never want to have kids with someone who didn't understand what this is all about. And so funny enough, when on one of the first dates I went on with Tanya Tay, my now wife, we actually met Ethan Hawke.
Oh, no way.
Yeah,
Talk about
years later,
serendipity.
And it was because I was still in the military, and he had done a movie about the drone wars, and they were offering tickets to people in the DC area, and it was actually the same director as Gattaca, and so they were there doing like a Q&A.
Wild.
And I was like, huh, interesting.
Very cool, yeah.
Perhaps
Him and
pursue
Alex
this
Jones in
further.
Waking Life, they cover this stuff as well, like transhumanism. For me, it's like, yes, if we can cure these diseases, give people ability that they didn't have before, but it's not going to end there, guys. This is going to turn into a Black Mirror episode where, again, you're going to be invalid if you don't have this. Right. Everyone is going to be hyper intelligent. Everyone is going to be super knowledgeable. Like
everyone's going to be super
intelligent. Are already
all of the things that make
a little bit of that
all
right
of the
now.
things that make us, that make people special, these specialized fields, right? Nothing is going to be special anymore because everybody's going to have the ability, and then it brings us to the point, like you said, where you're either valid or you're an invalid. Because if you don't have that, then you're now considered stupid. Because you're not hooked up to this like mainframe that gives you a download of information.
Because he was a love baby. That's what they called him. Because he wasn't gene spliced.
He was
engineered.
engineered.
So he was like a love baby, and it gets into questions of, you know, I think it gets into spiritual questions as well.
Yeah,
completely.
Does God have a role in all of this? Does God have a place for any of this? And at what point are we trying to just play God? And I think
100%.
there's problems with that.
It never goes
vehemently
well.
against transhumanism.
Never go what? Sorry?
No, it never goes well when it does.
This is where there's an argument for regulation to a certain extent.
We saw this
if we
in
had
COVID.
a Congress
We tried this
that was
in COVID,
effective
and
not like
was a
totally out
complete
to
failure.
lunch, yeah, definitely.
You and I have discussed
doesn't.
regulation with regard to
Exactly.
California. Like if you want to legalize something like marijuana or you have to regulate. You can't have people shooting up on the streets.
I agree.
Like
Yeah.
if you're gonna, you know,
It's not fair to
think
the people who live in these communities who have to deal with people literally shooting up and smoking drugs on the streets. It's not okay.
I think regulation, again, like everything, it's always a U-shaped curve where too much of something is bad. But there's definitely a Goldilocks zone where you could exploit
But it's so
certain
hard
technologies.
to draw the line, though, because also, like, for example, I'm just going to pick a random trait. Being short is a disadvantage in many circumstances.
Sure is.
So are we going to make that a pathology as well? Or being ugly, or whatever it is, or being, I don't know, like having the wrong hair color. Like, what counts as a disease at the end of the day? It's going to be, the line is going to be redefined every step of the way.
If it gets dystopian enough, it could be believing in God. If you believe in God, that could be considered something that is a mental illness. No, seriously, if it got dark and dystopian enough, that could be classified as a mental illness that they could correct with something like Neuralink, if they have that type of power over your brain.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're getting deep down the rabbit hole.
We are.
But
All
I'm
right.
just saying,
I'll take us back to reality here.
Thank you, Jillian.
All right, my bad. Here we are. Next topic. Fantastic suggestion from our homie over here, Anna, is partisan hypocrisy. So we've seen this, it's killing the country, and each side loves to call out corruption and censorship and overreach, but not when their side does it. So Anna, go, buddy. This is awesome.
Basically, Bill Maher did this excellent monologue recently on his show, Real Time with Bill Maher, where he kind of called out the partisan hypocrisy, where let's say you're on the left has held views in favor of something for a long time. In comes Donald Trump, he purports to want to support the same policy, and all of a sudden the Democrats are against it. I thought this was a fantastic segment, and the point that I want to make before we toss to the video is know who you are, what your values are, and what your principles are, and stick to them. Don't get swayed by partisan tribal BS, because there might be some areas in which there's a coalition on the left and maybe a group of people on the right that can work together to get policy they both want passed. And that's never going to happen if, like, your default reaction is to just automatically take the opposite position from your political rivals. So with that in mind, let's take a look at a part of Bill Maher's segment.
And finally, New World Americans must get over the fantasy they have that they are a people of core convictions and deeply held beliefs. They're not. They only care which side is saying something. Let me give you 10 million examples. This car used to be fire. Now it's on fire. Back when Elon Musk was presumed liberal, liberals loved electric cars and conservatives hated them. Then Elon went MAGA, and while the car market grew by 10% last month, sales of electric vehicles were down 5%, and not just Teslas, all EVs. Conversely, MAGA Nation used to hate EVs. 2 years ago, 71% of Republicans said they would not consider buying an electric car. Trump said they were for, quote, radical left fascists, Marxists, and communists. Now he's selling them on the White House lawn. Everything's computer. That's right, Tarzan. Everything's computer.
So good and so true.
Oh my God, spot on.
Yeah, so
The car's still there, by the way. I saw it the other day.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's just parked in front of like the West Wing.
That's
so
insane.
funny.
It's just there. Well, because it's like, who else would park a red Tesla there? And it's like, oh, because it's his.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's just there.
No one drives it. It's just there.
So look, the electric vehicles are one thing, but when we're talking about policy and political leadership, we want solutions to very real problems that we're experiencing. You're just never going to come to any solution if the party is so divided that even if, like, internally you agree with something the left is saying, or you agree with something the right is saying, your political rivals are saying, you just automatically have to say, no, I'm against it because of the tribalism.
Right.
And also because your in-group will probably come down hard on you if you're willing to concede that the opposite party is making a good point about something.
100%. To go back to the example of the big, beautiful bill, there's so many yes men who, the reason why they weren't having serious negotiations when people like Thomas Massey were speaking out about it is because so many people said yes automatically because they do not want to be seen as the one who's standing in Trump's way, even though it would have potentially affected the deficit, right? Going back to things that we were talking about in previous episodes. So, yeah, I can absolutely see that happening.
I have a question. Is it not true that the last time we successfully balanced the budget is when Clinton worked with Gingrich across the aisle? I think that is the friggin' last time, guys.
Exactly.
That was the last time we had a surplus, an economic surplus in this country.
But you had a coalition between these two guys. Like, they formed a partnership and solved the problem. I don't think, and the point being, when the two sides come together on a common good, is that not the only way forward?
I see it as an important way forward on the select issues where I think you can have bipartisan collaboration. And look, for me, right now, what I'm seeing is there is a group of Republicans who have deviated from the neoconservatism of the Bush era. And I share a lot of their beliefs and their views on foreign policy, right? Not wanting to engage in these foreign interventions, not wanting to spend hundreds of billions of dollars propping up, you know, some country in their war. Like, I just think we need to stop and think about, all right, if we're going to engage in some foreign conflict, what does this do to benefit the American people?
Right.
Because we're using American taxpayer dollars in, you know, supplying weapons and intel to whatever country we're engaging in.
Jillian, you brought up a really good point about Gingrich, because shortly after this deal, you know what happened? He sent out a memo to the entire party basically telling everyone to escalate the rhetoric and to, you know, use the most vicious language towards the Democrats, because that's the way that he won. He got the House back. He got the House majority back. And another thing is, right now, the incentives completely shifted. We don't have 435 members of the House of Representatives. We have 435 social media influencers. Oh, God. And they do everything they can to make it on Fox or MSNBC if you're on the left side, or Fox News or Newsmax on the other side. They parade for the cameras. They go after that viral hit. It doesn't matter. They're not in Congress to actually do something useful to the American people. They're in Congress to juice up their fundraising numbers for the quarter. They're in Congress to dial for dollars, to make sure that they raise X amount of dollars, the hundreds of thousands of dollars that they need to meet. It's all about that. It's all about re-election. They spend so much time on the phone begging for money. That's essentially what they do all day.
Jack?
Well, I think one of the big things, I asked a question about this at the White House at a press conference not too long ago, is that we have seen elements of the far left completely embracing hardcore violence. And I see this with the Luigi Maggioni and Luigi Maggioni, his supporters, and this idea that, so you have the populist left and the populist right, and they're two different camps that exist. And to your point, there's a lot of overlap between a lot of this on economics, on foreign policy. Honestly, it should be on immigration as well, because Bernie Sanders used to be like an immigration restrictionist, and he actually said open borders, that's a Koch brothers policy.
He did say that during a Vox interview with Ezra Klein in 2015.
Which it
Look
is,
it up.
by
He
the
did
way.
say that, and he was accurate about that.
And there are so many of us that are totally against that. But the issue that I also see is that, like, so with populism, populism can be dangerous. And in some populism, it's to say, hey, we're mad at the system and we want to do something about it. So you get one side of populism is reformers, and we want to fix the system. And so if MAGA, Trump, whatever you call it, America First, is going to be successful, it's reforming the system. The other side is we need to kill everybody and take their stuff. And that's Luigi Maggioni.
I think that goes a little too far. I would not say it is a core belief of left-wing populists that we need to murder people and take their stuff.
It's a core belief of left-wing populists.
There are unhinged lunatics, sure, who advocate for violence. I agree with you on that. However, I think it's a small group. There's also encouragement of violence on the far right as well. You have to acknowledge that, right?
That is true.
Well, what I'm saying though is there's a huge track record of populist leftist movements in places like France, Russia, Spain, China that have led to abject warfare, civil war, revolution.
Sure, yes,
in the past.
but we're talking about the United States, and I'm talking about the American left. I don't think that it is a wide-held.
I see a lot of Luigi hats. I see a lot of Luigi hats out there.
I mean, there were people on the right also supportive of what Luigi did.
Which was insane, by the way. Which was insane. Completely insane to give that any credence whatsoever.
Let me just say, I do not in any way support murdering people. That didn't solve anything, right? No. Obviously, it didn't do anything to fix our healthcare system.
But
instead of just condemning the people who are cheering on Mangione, can we just at least acknowledge, man, our system, our healthcare is so messed up that people feel comfortable publicly celebrating a murderer.
Right.
You know, that's an issue.
Yeah.
And it's going to become worse. It's going to get, I mean, you're going to probably see more and more cases like that unless we fix this system.
More and more assassinations?
I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest with you.
And this is something that started during COVID as well.
This is why you need to put a clamp down on anyone who performs this type of stuff, because it always gets out of hand. And that's my point.
How would you propose doing that, though, without violating civil rights, civil liberties, things like that?
Well, I wrote a whole book about it, but
giving him a life sentence.
what you do is, and maybe we're talking past each other a little bit, because what I've said is, understand the grievance and then try to fix the situation.
Yes.
Anyone who takes matters into their own hands, like a Maggione, you know, that obviously they need to be locked up, they need to be taken care of, et cetera, take them off the battlefield, whatever it is, but also understand the grievance that's driving it. That's where the populist,
and there's no
hopefully a successful
for that guy, though,
populist
Jack.
right comes in.
So the guy that he shot, and I'm not suggesting it's ever okay to kill someone, but this is a guy that I think, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I had covered this actually in detail with Brigham Bueller, that ended up driving up the cost of insurance for millions of people, and a bunch of people got cut from care. And then he shorted the stock with insider trading and crashed a bunch of pension funds for firefighters and teachers and was not paying a price. So I totally appreciate, we've gone, again, once again, off base a bit, but I appreciate you cannot have this vigilante.
It never ends well.
I get it, but there's never seemingly any consequence for the other side. Which, if I could circle back to why we all need to be on the same page about things that are nonpartisan.
But
like
in this case, literally there are consequences for the other side. Have you seen United Healthcare stock? It's like this right now. You know, they're under criminal investigation.
Yes, but did this shine a spotlight on it?
It did.
But then he accomplished what he wanted.
Well,
so why did he have to kill this guy for that to happen? Is sort of the bigger question. And
because he wanted to. Because he wanted the notoriety, because he wanted, you see this, by the way, difference, it's between like Zoomer extremists and millennial extremists.
Okay.
Because millennials would do like, you know, mass movements, BLM marches, in some forms Antifa, you know, form this, or, you know, this group, that group. With Zoomers, it's much more like, I want to be the person who goes viral because I want the notoriety. So you saw this with Luigi Maggione. You saw this with Thomas Matthew Crooks, who attempted to kill President Trump. You saw this with this most recent guy.
That 25-year-old anti-natalist or something?
He's an anti-human.
Is this the guy that
the IVF clinic
guy?
bombed an IVF clinic because he hates humanity and actually hates God, basically, for creating him and him being born.
The boys are not all right. Like there's a lot of like pain in this country.
Amy, I know you wanted to talk about something.
Just one quick second. I just feel like there has been a social conditioning of this again since COVID, and I know I keep coming back to COVID. I probably sound very repetitive.
Screwed everybody
fiery
up.
but mostly peaceful protest.
For sure.
Fiery but mostly peaceful protest. Do you remember that headline? The way that violence became normalized during the COVID era. It's really set us up for everything that we're running into now. And I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it was contrived and it was by design.
Amy, thank you so much for bringing that up, because I happen to be on the street that they burned down in Philadelphia.
Oh, wow.
And
What street?
Rittenhouse Square. They burned it down.
You were in Rittenhouse?
I moved after the fire.
Oh, okay.
But they burned my street
No,
down.
I went to Temple.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, it's a beautiful neighborhood. I'm so glad
Rittenhouse
you were there.
Square is
but
gorgeous.
it wasn't in the summer of 2020.
Oh, I
They
know.
burned down the entire street. My street smelled like rubber. I have no idea why for an entire month, and I had to keep my windows closed. So do not tell me it was a summer of love. It was traumatic for everyone involved, and it actually caused me to move. I had to move. The damage was so great. And so they were heralded, though, as this emblem of racial justice. And, you know, they're just such hypocrites. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. Look, I think the problem was the media did lie. There was violent looting and rioting at night, right?
Yeah.
But what really sucks is I think the right to protest is important. And there were most of the protesters during the day weren't causing problems, were protesting something that they feel passionately about. And I hate the fact that they're getting defamed and conflated with the wreckers, right? With these sorry, I don't want to curse, but like the
Please curse.
Call them that. They are
Yeah,
assholes.
they are.
They're paid
They're
agitators too. Who knows?
absolute assholes,
Yeah.
okay? Many of whom, by the way, if you look at video, white guys, like just breaking into businesses, causing all sorts of
I
problems.
push back on the white guy
Yeah,
thing.
No, there were
black.
plenty of people of color
There's a
doing
lot
it
of
too.
black violence
There's a mixed
in
bag
there.
in there.
But look, it's just really
Well,
interesting
and-
because whenever
but
you
to your
see
point,
some of
Antifa
these
is
like
largely
radical
white.
movements, whenever you do see these radical movements, the people who speak up the loudest and rile people up the most. I mean, just take a look at the videos. The activists tend to be white, okay? And they rile people up.
The people who burned down my street were black, though. I'm very
They're
certain.
definitely.
Yeah.
They were black.
Yeah, in
We're
Chaz,
predominantly.
They were black,
in
without a
Chaz
single
in
doubt.
Seattle,
I'm just saying, like, I
Simone
can't
was black,
pretend that something didn't happen because it's like politically correct. I'm not blaming. I'm not saying
no,
you're doing
I'm not
that,
saying
but a lot
that
of
there
people
weren't
I
black
know,
people involved.
like all the white people are the ones stealing, and it's like
No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm
I mean,
saying.
there are definitely people of color in the mix there.
Yeah,
It's just everybody was behaving badly, not just the white guys.
Well, I'm also, now that I'm out of the Democratic Party, I can tell the truth. And the truth is they were predominantly black. And I have footage on my phone that I sent to my family of black people zooming into the Lululemon down the street and just grabbing everything and going into the Nike
Right,
store.
but that wasn't protesters. That was just looting. It's just
Those are
straight
no,
up
those
looting.
were
Thank you.
protesters.
That's
what-
what
that's
the point I'm trying to make.
They did that.
And you see this,
But Jack,
you see
they
this
did
in
that in the-
disaster situations.
They did that
like,
in the-
oh, it's a disaster. We got to go hit the Foot
We're
Locker.
gonna have those people
But
take
the
advantage of
problem
the
is,
situation.
They did that in the name of George Floyd. They had people, they were interviewing
That was
people.
the
They were
pretense
exploiting
upon which
protest
they were
to behave
allowed
the way they were behaving.
exactly to
Look,
be protesting when people couldn't visit their grandmother or die in the hospital.
By the way, what you're doing right here is proving my point that I said earlier, that when you allow violence, it always gets out of hand.
Right.
I agree with that
It
completely.
immediately starts getting out of
100%.
hand, and you get opportunists and whatever color they are come in and start committing more violence, and they say, oh, this is righteous
100%.
because of whatever. And we see this throughout history where people will take whatever the movement is, whatever the grievance is, and many times they are legitimate grievances, like people with healthcare issues, et cetera, but then when it comes down to it, it's who gets more control? The violent people.
Yeah.
And who gets more ability to commit harm is the violent people. And those movements get worse and worse. So that's why I'm saying meet the grievance, but also for anyone who is committing violence, you got to come down like Singapore on those guys.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we did the opposite thing, and you had Kamala Harris going out there raising money for the people.
She
who
sure
were,
did.
She did.
Yeah.
She did. I want
And
to.
the tweet is still up, by the way. She still hasn't deleted it.
She hasn't. Why would she?
Because it's a wildly unpopular position right now. But I want to bring it back to the initial idea real quick before we close it. And you brought up COVID, the hypocrisy piece, because health is really at the center of this one,
Yes.
obviously for me. So to make a point, whether you like the vaccine or you didn't like the vaccine, when it was Trump's vaccine, it was a miracle. Operation Warp Speed. And you were watching everybody on the left talk about how they would never touch
Oh,
Trump's
yeah, yeah,
vaccine.
yeah.
Now, Trump's out.
Including Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched the presidential debate, and he's like, they're like, oh, it's not going to be out till the summer of, I think, 22 or whatever, or summer of 21. And he's like, it's going to be out a lot sooner. And they're making fun of him. Cut to, he's out of office, Biden's in office, and within a matter of weeks, the vaccine is out. And now everybody on the right doesn't want to take the vaccine. And everybody on the left is like, you're killing my grandma. But this kind of tribalism deeply hurts the American people, and we do it ourselves, not just the politicians. So I would simply say to everybody watching, the person that's getting hurt here is you. Because whether or not the vaccine was good or bad, if we had come together to demand proper safety testing for this vaccine, which we were told they had, but in truth, they pushed it through an emergency use loophole. And it's been known now that the NIH was studying people who were injured during the vaccine trials as they're rolling out these vaccines. So to bring it home, the hypocrisy is hurting the American people in every way possible, from every angle possible.
Amen.
And if we stop engaging with it and think about who is manipulating this, it's to our detriment, so don't buy into it.
That's
Yeah,
totally.
and sorry to interrupt you, but I would just say, even if your political opponents are making a claim and you want to just automatically disbelieve anything they're saying, just for yourself, do the due diligence and look into it. And look into it in good faith, because they might be accurate, they might be making a good point. They might be full of crap. You never know.
Petroleum-based food dyes, fluoride in the water. Do some homework. It's your body.
Or celebrities in spirit cooking.
Exactly.
Or the most recent example is tariffs. You know, Democrats were for it once upon a time, and now they hate it so much.
Video after video of them saying.
Nancy Pelosi praising to the heavens the virtue of tariffs. And Bernie Sanders was in favor of tariffs, but all of a sudden it's like the worst thing in the world.
Protectionism was a left-wing issue for like most of political history.
The thing is, Trump derangement syndrome.
And health. I've said this so many times to reporters, and nobody like takes it up on me. I'm like, when did Republicans ever run on health and win? That's just never been a thing that we've ever had any.
The left ceded the mantle.
No, he ran on tariffs. Like that was
tariffs
and immigration. Those are the two things that he repeated in every speech and every public event.
What I mean to say is that health has always been a Democrat issue.
True.
Obamacare was all health care, and Republicans were always stuck in this, horrible position of having to say, like, well, I support pharma and I support the healthcare companies, while all these horrible stories are coming out. It is not politically popular to do so. And then suddenly, through this merger with RFK and MAHA, which, by the way, I would, even as a MAGA guy, I'll say this: MAHA is the #1 political movement in America right now. Currently, it is the #1. It's just true. So that's just an accurate statement. And so you have this ability to flank to the left on healthcare. So Republicans ran to the left of Democrats on healthcare, which is like,
and it's not just that.
Nobody talks about
You know
it.
what I think a big part of it is, and Jillian, you can probably speak to this. The left went so the opposite way, where it's like, yeah, you can be 400 pounds and you're really healthy and you're beautiful.
The more
it's
obese, the better.
Eventually, it's going to flip back the other side, and the party of common sense is going to come in and say, well, hey, maybe it's not super healthy to be 400 pounds, and to tell everyone that big is beautiful and health at any size.
Did you hear what RFK Jr. said during the congressional hearing in response to the Democratic members of Congress who were lambasting him? He said, I actually managed to get food dye out in like a few days. What have you guys been doing?
Zero.
Exactly.
It's been an abject failure.
And now they're against him because he's
in the Trump administration.
Because
George
Trump
yes.
is the legitimate.
But, okay, final thing I'll say about this, because I just... It is one thing to engage in the rhetoric to give people the illusion that you're outflanking the left. However, if you pay close attention, there are some areas in which the Trump administration is doing things that are not good for the health of Americans. For instance, rolling back regulations that banned forever chemicals in our drinking water. Why? Why would you do that?
Could I just say
Forever
one
chemicals.
thing? Because
it's in plastics and stuff like that. It seeps into our drinking supply.
I know RFK has been talking about microplastics.
I think RFK probably wanted to keep those regulations in place. There's probably someone else in the Trump administration.
There you go. He's not in charge of that. So,
because it's the EPA.
People cross-pollinate the topics, understandably so, because environmental health impacts human health. But he's not in charge of those rollbacks. So he's constantly getting attacked for something he's not in control of. And I would just simply put that out there. And I know I think in large part, we all agree with you that we need to protect the health of the environment.
It's
100%.
Anna's totally right about the chemicals, and I have to say something brave, so please give me credit for this, because I'm going to break from Trump here, but I have to. This is the issue that kept me as a Democrat for a decade. I would have left sooner had Republicans been stronger on this issue, and that's the environment. I'm sorry. I care deeply, and actually, it started with Nixon. He started the EPA. The Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act came into being under Republican leadership. We ought to take that back and not allow Democrats to monopolize it. But Trump could be better on this issue. He really can, and I have to be intellectually honest. He's talking about drill, baby, drill. He's talking about curtailing EPA regulations, but we really, honestly, we shouldn't be doing that because there are American lives at stake.
It's tough when there's American jobs tied to it. And he you know, I agree with you.
I have to tell
but
the
that's
truth
the
on this.
Against drilling?
Yeah, I am.
Well, I mean, do you like power?
I like renewable energy. I'm very Elon in this regard.
That is where it comes from.
I'm with RFK Jr. on this matter. I'm just I'm environmentalist. Like, that's how I came
She doesn't fly private either. Like, she's had opportunities to fly private.
Only once in 2013, I had a logistical nightmare.
Not pulling the Taylor Swift on that one.
I care deeply. Like, I wrote my college thesis on this. This is my issue. It's my
and
baby.
I feel you. I hate that they make it a left-wing thing. When I say that I care about environmentalism too, like, I don't believe in global warming. I believe in climate change.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about air pollution.
Yeah, I mean,
water,
all of these things. Why have they made it so that it's a leftist issue to care about the environment?
True.
And to care about
Thank you.
I don't like that.
Especially when you look at it.
Business slash trickle-down economics slash jobs slash business slash business slash business.
To the credit of some Republican voters, they were not happy with Trump allowing for drilling on public lands because guess what? There are Republican voters who love the public lands. They like to go hunting, fishing. They like to enjoy our national parks and things like that. And so it's a balancing act because right now in California, for instance, a lot of oil companies are leaving. A lot of people are losing their jobs because of environmental regulations. So I get that it's a balancing act. At the same time,
look at these giant windmill farms. Like, where are the environmentalists on that? With these massive, and they're right offshore. You can't even take a picture on the beach with this, like,
killing
they're like,
birds.
oh, they're killing birds and the whales, by the way. Where they're all washing up on shore, and they're like, "Oh, this is renewable and it's better." And is it better? We had a McGitmo actually. It was ridiculous.
Have they
don't
tied
generate
that to the windmills, the whales washing up?
I believe there was something. I could be wrong, but there was something about that.
I just want to remind folks,
and so it's like, I hear you. I hear
I'm
you,
not
and
saying that I'm
I'm
an
not like
extremist
being
on
a
that.
shill for like fossil
wait,
fuel or something here, but I
Jack,
do like the country having energy.
How about
Yes, I
nuclear?
agree.
And
I should go
I'm
nuclear.
100%
That is the answer.
for
Definitely.
nuclear.
Yeah.
Fifth generation nuclear energy is amazing.
Yep.
It's like, I mean, think about it. Think about it. We found magic rocks that produce unlimited magical energy. And because there was like one problem one time where somebody screwed up the magic rocks that wasn't even in this country.
Well,
we just decided to not
I live
use.
close to 3 Mile Island.
I live close to 3 Mile Island too. And 3 Mile Island showed that the system actually worked because guess what? 3 Mile Island stood there and nobody died. So.
Well, it's also been so many years, surely.
Right, it's the 70s.
Yeah,
like, we still
like,
have a space program, even though the space program
Jack,
had
I'm with you
actions
on
at the
nuclear
time.
energy, but I also want to remind folks, like going back to what Anna and Amy were saying, who was the president who started, the legacy of national parks and protecting our
Teddy
environment?
Roosevelt.
Yes, thank you. Why do Democrats have a monopoly on this issue? We have to take it back.
Especially when, if you look at Democrats, they typically don't live anywhere where there's any nature. They're like, you find them.
true.
You always find them in these like giant cities,
true.
and it's actually conservatives that live in the rural areas and are constantly getting crapped on as like, oh, you bunch of hicks out there, and it's like, no, they actually live where there's nature.
And I've been saying this. I've been very vocal on this environmental issue, and you'd be surprised. Conservatives are embracing me on this issue. They are not attacking me. The American people
because
agree.
they get cancer too.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yep.
Cancer doesn't see party.
Kids get asthma from the air pollution.
Precisely. Cancer doesn't see you're Democrat or Republican. It does not discriminate. So this is something that we can all rally behind, I believe.
Well, this has been an enlightening conversation, everyone. Thank you so much. Jack, you were fantastic. We appreciate you.
I really was. I think that I was definitely the standout star of the show today.
Without question. So
Without question.
where can people get more from you?
Typically, if you want to follow me, just go to look for like Media Matters or CNN or MSNBC because they're constantly whining about me.
They'll definitely cover you, that's for
Are
sure.
you banned on like different platforms or
No,
anything?
I'm not banned
No?
anywhere.
Okay.
I'm banned, actually.
I'm banned on TikTok because of ivermectin.
Really?
I have to let the separate show.
Oh, wow.
All right, you two, where can we get more from you?
So you guys can find me on Manect, Amy Dangerfield on Manect, and then you can also find me at Dangerous Conversations, which is my show. You can just search that up on YouTube.
I'm also on Manect, and I will respond quickly to all of your texts and calls. And you can find me on X at Lindy Li.
All right, I'm the executive producer and host of The Young Turks. You can check that out at youtube.com/TheYoungTurks. You can also read my Substack. I have interview conversations on there as well, kasparian.substack.com.
So I'm just going to be here the whole time till the next show. I'll just be right in front of the skyline there. Guys, if you like the show, please help us out. Like, click, comment, share, subscribe. Thanks so much.